Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we're going to be talking about Tesla's shareholder meeting yesterday. We'll go through some of the major topics that came up, obviously advertising being one of those. Also talk about Elon Musk's interview with David Faber, and a few other items, including some news on, or a report rather, on Tesla possibly proposing a factory in India. All right, so looking at the stock, nice reaction today after the shareholder meeting, up 4.4% to close at $173.86. While the Nasdaq was up 1.3%, so giving a nice boost to the overall markets today, or rather the overall market's giving a nice boost to Tesla probably today as well, following the shareholder meeting. So getting into kind of what we heard, hopefully everyone went into this with relatively low expectations, right? We have just had Investor Day less than 2 months ago, or around 2 months ago. We had our Q1 earnings call, a handful of weeks ago. So hopefully going into this, no one should have been expecting anything groundbreaking or anything too new, other than there was a little bit of that rumor that maybe Elon was going to step down as CEO, which he rejected, obviously, and is going to be continuing, and had a lot of good things to say about his involvement of Tesla and just kind of freeing up time from Twitter. So I think in general, I've paused the video here at a very specific point because this was kind of the vibe I got overall from the meeting, right? Like Elon was in really good spirits. I think he was very calm and relaxed, also very positive and optimistic. Despite feeling like this is a very difficult time for the macro environment and for Tesla to work through some of the challenges that presents. Still very confident in the long-term vision, and I think feeling like Tesla is in a really good spot, and probably feeling a little bit of weight off, a little bit of relief off now that Twitter also seems to be in a much better spot as well. So I think really good to see that, and just, for Elon to express that confidence, and just in general, I think there were a lot of positive vibes from the shareholder meeting, which, one of the bigger takeaways, since we didn't necessarily have all that much in terms of really new things. Obviously, they talked a little bit about the next gen vehicle, teasing that, talking about maybe 5 million or so in terms of volume. Hopefully numbers like that aren't too surprising given Tesla's plans to eventually go to 20 million a year. So for them to kind of go from where they're at with Model 3 and Model Y now up to sort of that next level, I think completely makes sense. So good to see that. The little teaser image that they showed, looks a little bit like a Model 3 outline. Some people are thinking it might even be a Model 3 outline, so not really anything groundbreaking for us to see with that teaser image, but hopefully Tesla will have more to share on that in the coming months and years. So outside of that, there was a couple things on Optimus, which we'll talk about, but I think probably the overwhelming thing from the shareholder meeting was really the comment on advertising, right? Kevin got up there asking about, a lot of people just aren't informed on Tesla, and is advertising a possible way to help people get a little bit more informed? I think he presented the question really well, and in a way that Elon was kind of receptive to, and responded, oh yeah, like not everyone does know some of these great things about the company, which I think has been kind of the argument for a long time, is really just help inform people, and there are probably good ways that Tesla can go about doing that. So not to sound like I'm just jumping on the bandwagon here, I do have to give some of my history here. This is back in 2021. I think it's worth testing out at least. Here back in April this year, Tesla should be advertising in Oregon because there were EV incentives at that point that were really strong. So this is something I've been kind of wanting Tesla to try out at least and learn about, right? It's a tool in the toolbox, and it feels a little bit silly to not at least evaluate what that tool can do for the company. So my thoughts have really not changed too much since then. I did an episode back in, again, 2021, just kind of walking through my thoughts, and I'll post the link on that down in the description. I was doing a little bit more of an updated episode on that. Looks like I can spare some of those comments now with these, with this update from Elon. But in general, I'm happy to see their receptivity of, the question that Kevin asked here. I'm glad that Tesla's going to try this out. The way that I think about it is sort of twofold. I think part of how Elon has presented it in the past is saying that every dollar that Tesla has should go to making the product better, and advertising doesn't necessarily do that. And if they can not have a budget for advertising, that allows them to save a lot of money that they can then use to bring the price of vehicles down. And I think that is an extremely valid way to look at it. But when you kind of separate out how Tesla brings cost of vehicles down from advertising as a component of the cost, I think it gets a little bit more complicated, because if you don't advertise in perpetuity, if you're not just advertising constantly forever, then there's nothing fundamentally tying the cost of advertising to the cost of the vehicle, and therefore the price of the vehicle. So if you separate those, and you view advertising as something that you maybe do on occasion or something that the budget changes for over time, then it really doesn't have anything to do with the cost of the vehicle, and it doesn't have anything to do with affordability. And you can then use advertising as a lever for profitability, which is something that has been a little bit of a pressure point for Tesla during this period. So when there are periods like that where, let's say, the macro environment is more challenging, interest rates are going up, maybe it's a good tool to utilize during a period of time like that to be supportive of profitability. Again, not potentially forever, but during that period where it is a little bit more difficult for Tesla to hit maybe the margins that they want to be operating at, which generally seems to be more in the mid 20% range, which we're falling a little bit short of right now. So it's kind of like, peaks and valleys in demand. We talk about that, like demand pockets, demand peaks, and how that can vary over time, how that can vary over regions. Advertising, I think, can just be a tool where when you're in those pockets, you can utilize that tool to help make those pockets a little bit less deep and hopefully improve profitability, again, during those periods of time. So that's kind of how I view it. And I'm glad to see Tesla, being willing to test it out. I think they're going to find ways to make this successful. Again, this isn't a company that's been around forever, that's, running the same ads that they've been running for the last 2 decades. The Tesla should be able to find really high ROI advertising avenues right now, because again, it is new for them. They're in the earliest stage, picking the lowest hanging fruit and using that to be able to inform people about a lot of awesome things that the company does, that the products are able to do that other products can't. And that's a great position to be in when you're trying to advertise, because you actually have something that's interesting, that's informative, that's educational to tell people about, that maybe they'll be excited to learn. So I think it's exciting to see Tesla go down this path, and I'm glad to see the willingness to try it out and just see what happens, because Tesla is a very data-driven company and they've got a ton of data, but they're missing a little bit here because they haven't tried it. So with that, it should help at least understand if it's the right move or not. So glad to see that. Again, I'll post my prior thoughts on that in the description today. But kind of the other thing, it was really exciting to see an update on Optimus. Obviously, Tesla did that little 1 to 2 minute video, demonstrated the progress for Optimus, and I think it's really exciting to see how that progress seems to be happening very quickly. So a lot of the demonstrations focusing on what the bot's able to do now from a sort of dexterity perspective with the hands. They showed a number of things with interacting with eggs, maybe just one, but they're kind of always in the background in all these scenes. You can kind of see it there. So just kind of showing how quickly they're progressing from really the Tesla bot sort of walking on stage at AI Day 2 not too long ago. So aside from kind of the advertising thing, I think Optimus was actually one of the bigger parts of the annual meeting, and just kind of seeing the update on that. And Elon did say maybe they've tossed around the idea of maybe doing like an update Optimus podcast. He said maybe after the earnings calls, they can just spend 30 minutes or something like that, just giving kind of an update on how that project is going. And obviously Elon continues to believe that, not that that's the entire future of Tesla as a company, but it's going to be potentially the most, dominant aspect of the company someday. So exciting to see that progress. And then after the shareholder meeting, Elon did have an interview with David Faber, CNBC. So this was an interesting interview. I had to laugh here at how Verge described it. They said it was a very weird interview, and I don't really agree with that. I think it was a very good interview. I think David Faber did a great job. They covered a lot of different topics, from Tesla to Twitter to AI, and interesting questions. Some of them a little bit higher level, like things that Tesla people that follow closely are going to know. But they did get into some interesting points of discussion. Obviously, just kind of rounding out the advertising conversation, Elon did say, the goal there would be for the advertisements to be informative, to be entertaining. So I think, good to see his perspective on that. It's kind of remained consistent. On Tesla, he did talk about China a little bit. They kind of broached the topic, and Elon did mention that there are some constraints on our ability to expand in China. He said we're making as many cars as we can. It's not a demand issue. But just mentioning those constraints, and it was kind of in the context of just geopolitical potential tensions, sort of mixed in with, okay, what's demand like there? Are you worried about competition? So I don't really know exactly what Elon is sort of referring to there when he's talking about constraints, but it was interesting to see him kind of bring that up with a little bit of prompting, but not too much prompting from David Faber. So I don't know what those constraints are, but it is something definitely worth keeping an eye on and maybe considering in terms of how we think about Tesla's growth and where that might come from. In terms of just, the situation right now with balance of time and allocation of time with Twitter and things like that, Elon did say that, with Linda being appointed as CEO of Twitter, he's going to be able to devote a lot more time to Tesla, especially on AI development and new product development. So I think, good to hear that. Should be reassuring for people. Obviously, it's been a painful period here, both with the stock and just for Elon with having to get Twitter sort of, self-sufficient to an extent. And I think now it seems that way. And again, going back to just Elon's demeanor, it kind of feels like he's feeling that way, which I think is great to see. And then on kind of like the AI front, Elon did say he thinks Tesla is going to have a ChatGPT moment with FSD here, not too far away. Obviously thinks that's going to happen this year, but with his normal caveats of he's been wrong on that before. So I think that's a great way to describe it. And I hope that that's sort of how it plays out, where, at some point the progress happens. There's enough progress that happens where there's just a little bit of an inflection point, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, there's so much value here that people didn't really realize, and something happens that really opens up eyes to that. I think that's kind of what you would describe as a ChatGPT moment, which obviously we have seen, this year. So hopefully we're not too far off from that for Tesla. The other thing that really got a lot of attention from the interview was Elon basically saying, I'll go to the Verge thing because it's got the quote here, but Elon basically, or David Faber asked Elon about his just positions that he takes on Twitter and how that could potentially be damaging to Tesla, could be damaging to Twitter and their ability to, sell their products essentially. So Elon kind of paused and thought about that for a second and quoted Princess Bride, or, he says, you can offer me money, you can offer me power, I don't care. He followed that up by saying, I'll say what I want to say, and if the consequences are losing money, so be it. So you can take that as Elon saying, hey, I'm going to be a wild card, I just don't really care what the repercussions of that are. Or I think a more favorable interpretation, and probably, although I do think that's true to a small extent, I think a more favorable interpretation would be that, Elon isn't going to sacrifice what he believes in and the things he believes for the sake of money or power or something like that. So I think that's really more what Elon is getting at. I don't think it's probably not being interpreted that way broadly, but we've seen this in Elon's history. This is not new. How many times over the years has he said the stock price is too high? It's, being applied in different ways now, but Elon has always and will always continue to say what he believes in. And I don't think it's not something that Elon views as like, I don't care what happens from it. It's just something that he believes is the right way to do things. And in the long term, doing things the right way, even if there is some pain in the short term, will ultimately be a more successful path. So I think it's, a little bit more complicated than Elon just saying, oh, like, I don't care about any of that stuff. I think it's more of like Elon feels that is sort of the right path. But obviously those are just my thoughts on how Elon responded to that question, which again, just got a lot of attention following that interview. The other thing from the shareholder meeting, the Cybertruck was out there. I don't know if this came from the shareholder meeting, but probably did just based on the timing. So on the Cybertruck Owners Club forum, a look at the tow hitch for the Cybertruck. So just wanted to kind of throw that on screen in case people hadn't come across that and were curious what it looks like. All right, moving on. We do have an update from Reuters, or a report on a rumor from Reuters. They say that Tesla is in talks with India on a possible factory. They say that Tesla's proposed setting up a factory in India for both domestic sale and export. Apparently they told government officials this according to a source with direct knowledge of the matter. So they told government officials that they had proposed it. It seems a little bit weird. I don't know exactly how Reuters is reporting this, but they did say that this proposal came without specifying a location or really investment amount. So perhaps a very early stage proposal, which a proposal can be contingent on a lot of different things. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Tesla wants to sort of immediately move forward with something like that. Could be part of negotiations for other things as well. But it is interesting to see that it could be a possibility, certainly at some point. So I'm sure we'll hear more about that, as we have for many years on Tesla in India. And then we've got an interesting update from Tesla Europe on Twitter. They show that there's been an ADAC testing or reliability testing study that has been published that now includes electric vehicles for, I think, the first time. One of the problems with reliability studies is that electric vehicles, as newer vehicles, there's just hasn't been a ton of them out there for a long time. It's more difficult to evaluate the reliability. So this organization does very extensive research on reliability. They say for the first time in the 45-year history of the ADAC breakdown statistics, electric cars are now included. And Tesla, the Model 3, has scored really well on reliability for the first couple of model years here. So you can see all these different vehicles, looking at model years 2020 and 2019. That's as far back as they go for the history for Tesla. But the score here, 1.1, 0.9, falls into the very low category in terms of basically reliability type of issues. You can see how that compares with, Volkswagen kind of along the bottom, a couple models there. And then if we scroll up, some of the other cars falling in that bucket are Mercedes, BMW doing pretty well, Audi doing pretty well on those reliability scores in those early years. So really good to have like some really extensive third-party validation of the Model 3's reliability in Europe. I think that's something that gets questions on a lot, and again, there's not necessarily all that much data. We've talked about this with Consumer Reports going back many years now, but good to have like a little bit of another voice kind of joining that and talking about reliability from the data that they're seeing. So good to see that, and congrats to Tesla for the high scores on that. And then the last couple of things here, IDRA has posted an update on LinkedIn that says that another automaker has acquired a Giga Press, a legacy global US OEM. So they say this is a first for them. Who that would be, I think your choices would be Ford, Stellantis, and Ford Stellantis, and GM. But we might as well list Ford, I guess, twice, because that's probably who it would be, just based on how they seem to be pursuing electric vehicles a little bit more aggressively and a little bit more thoughtfully than maybe what we're seeing from Stellantis and from GM. So that would be my guess, but who knows. So, but nevertheless, interesting to see that update from IDRA. And then the last thing, just a quick correction. As I mentioned, I wanted to correct on this in case I messed something up because I hadn't had time to fully review it. Turns out I did mess something up. When we talked about the California market share statistics, I thought that maybe this lower bar was last year numbers. Should have scrolled down. It's US. So this is US market share versus California market share. So again, I'll need a little bit more time to go back and compare how this is coming in quarter over quarter and year over year and stuff like that. But just wanted to make that correction, which I did put in the pinned comment, which I try to do if I make errors. But just wanted to pass that along as well. All right, that will wrap it up for today. So as always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast. And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. I am still digging out of a hole here a little bit, but hopefully we'll see you tomorrow for the, I believe, let's make sure I don't get my date wrong here, Thursday, May 18th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.